Hey guys, how's it going? So, I want to talk to you a little bit before I start off the review, and I want to talk about something that's very serious. First of all, suicide is a terrible thing. It's a horrible thing that should never happen to anyone, and no one should ever think about it. But unfortunately, there are people who live everyday lives thinking about this, and it breaks my heart when people I know are affected and they're depressed and they see no other way but to end their lives. And to them, and if you're somebody like that watching this video right now, I just want to say that you're never alone. I don't know what could be the factors causing one to want to end their own life. 13 Reasons Why is one case of it. It could always be external reasons, it could always be internal reasons. And if it's whatever it may be, I want to tell you guys, and I want to say from the bottom of my heart, along with the community, subscribers that I have, that you're never alone in this. And if you're someone who is experiencing things in their lives which is not particularly great, and you are having these tendencies, please reach out. Please talk to other people. Call this number if you want. Go to this website if you can. Try and get some tips. Go to your friends. Go to your family members. It's a tough thing to do, but once you start talking about it, you can find a way to figure out how to deal with it. And it would be a great thing because life is great. Life is something that is wonderful, and you should have the right to live it as long as you can. And it's never the good idea to end it. And I don't want anybody to die because of suicides. And I don't want any of you to die. So if anything, just want to let you guys know that you're not alone. And if you're somebody who's sensitive to certain viewing, I would not recommend this season because it's a little extreme, even though there's a lot of warnings given. But that's just something I wanted to get out of the way. So here's the review now. Thanks, guys. It's weird seeing a show like 13 Reasons Why get a season 2, especially since season 1 ended the story. The novel ends with the ambiguous ending that season 1 did. It kind of leaves you to fill in the gaps a bit later. But just like the fact that there was a sequel to Trainspotting, even though Trainspotting had that ambiguous ending, kind of like to fill in the gaps regarding if you ever wanted to see a Trainspotting 2. Similarly, we have a 13 Reasons Why season 2, which has come out a little more than a year after the first season did. And this one takes place a few months after the first season, where we see that there's now a trial taking place. The parents, Hannah's parents, are now fighting the school in trying to figure out why she committed the suicide, and they're trying to put the blame on the school. Meanwhile, Clay finds a Polaroid in his locker room, which leads to the fact that there were more girls than Hannah who were raped by Bryce. And Bryce is trying to do the best that he can to get away from this entire situation because, according to him, he never raped her. This was all consensual. But this is a no spoiler review, and I don't want to give anything away in case you are planning on watching the season, which I would assume that if you're watching this review, you do plan on watching the season eventually or have seen the season. I think the first season was really great. It was one of those things that it was very controversial. It still is, but it handled some of the aspects it needed to very well. It was a very engaging story, and I was constantly interested in it, and it kept me binge watching it. I watched the entire thing in like one night. First of all, let's talk about the positives of the season. This actually does one very brave thing. Because that first season was so controversial, because it addressed certain things and showcased certain things that were very disturbing, that weren't particularly right, and that affected many people, they found a way to rectify their mistakes. Season 2, the first half of it, is a very long apology and like a course correction for everything that happened in the first season. It's almost like they took into account the fact that people were very upset regarding certain things in the first season, and they were addressing the flaws head on, which I think is a really brave thing to do. It was honestly the best thing that they could have done at this point because of the controversy being so huge, especially regarding the fact that sensitive viewers had to actually see Hannah commit suicide on screen without any prior warnings. This season actually starts with a PSA from the cast, which I thought was a really smart choice, and they give you proper warnings before each episode depending on what the content is. There's some really crazy episodes in this one as well, And I like the fact that they did that. They also do this in a way that it helps expose certain issues that the first season had regarding storytelling. One of the major flaws I had with the first season was that they never really went into the parents. They never really tried to say that, what if you're responsible for something over here? I'm not trying to point fingers at parents here, but they were a factor in it in some way or the other. This season actually does a pretty good job of showing that they're going to be at fault regardless of what happens in this entire trial. And I think that's a very brave approach. The best part of the season, however, once again, is Catherine Langford. This is a brilliant actress, and this is 2 seasons in a row she's given outstanding performances. Every time she shows up in this season, it's easily the best part of the entire season. Those are the best scenes, those are the most engaging scenes, those are the scenes that you're the most invested in, and she's really selling it here. She's such a good actress, and I can't wait to see her in more things. Dylan Minnette, who played Clay in the first season, and over here as well, also really great. Dealing with a lot of things this time going around, just like the first season. The standout, however, in terms of the original cast, aside from Catherine Langford once again, is Brandon Flynn as Justin. This guy is so good in this season. They have an arc for him that goes on over here due to the way his story ended in season 1, the fact that his mom is with this drug abuser and he's constantly abusing her, and he finally runs away with some of the cash, and now he's in a very dark place in his life, and the show does a great job of rebuilding him back, and they finally complete his redemption arc by the end of the season in a very good way. And I really like that. Acting all around actually was really good, and it had some other neat ideas like that as well, the way it handled certain real life things. Coming to the end of the season, it does get a little bit crazy, and it has a slow burn quality to it. We'll talk more about that actually in a second. But the way it brings in certain dramatic elements I found very interesting, and it was a good way to wrap up certain things from that first season. And once things actually start to escalate at a point, they get pretty good. My problem is everything leading up to some part of that escalation. This is a very slow burn of a season, and the pacing it's bad. Unlike the first season, which was constantly thrilling and keeping you on the edge of your seat, now that's not really there. Because that first season had the tapes, it used that as a way to keep the viewer engaged. Season 2 is so much of a court drama, and you're staring down at the obvious for so long while watching the season that you want to call it out, but the show is just constantly dragging it through. You know what's going to happen at a point. It becomes a little unfocused that way, and you kind of start to pause a lot while watching it. You kind of hit the pause button, walk around, come back, and then watch the rest. That's not something you want to do with an engaging season 2, especially not with a season 2 of a season 1 that was so riveting from start to finish. If you want to do something like that, sure, but that's not the way you do things over here, because it really results in the viewer having problems watching it. Secondly is, I mentioned it takes a while to get going. Once things really start to heat up, it gets interesting. It's only the second half of episode 7 onwards until the end that it starts to pick up a bit. And then in the last few episodes, it really goes from like 1 to 10. It just escalates crazily, which could be a little crazy for some viewers, but it does manage to work a bit. But the pacing, still, everything leading up to that point is a little bizarre. Also, the structuring is very uneven. There's a lot more subplots that are introduced here, and they're not, again, as riveting, and unfortunately, they're also very unfocused. The show wants you to focus on one thing, but then it brings up 5 other things, and in the process, it gets a little jumbled. And because of the fact that this is completely new source material, this is based off of something else the writers have come up with, it can get a little confusing to watch at points. But my fatal flaw with season 2, if it's the one thing that absolutely derails it in many ways, is the fact that it doesn't feel necessary. It doesn't feel like it needs to exist. There's a few things from that first season ending which are answered a bit in this one, which some viewers can find satisfaction with. But otherwise, it doesn't have to be a second season. The show ends in a way right now where they have to have a season 3 because it ends on a massive cliffhanger, but it almost feels like you didn't have to have that in the first place. I feel like this could be answered in like an epilogue episode at the end of season 1. And they spend so long with this, and it gets, again, very tedious. And that's essentially what I can say about this entire season. It's tedious. It takes forever for things to happen in this season. And unfortunately, viewers' patience kind of runs out really early on. You have to stick with it for a long time. I have a friend watching it right now who just sent me a text earlier saying, I don't even think I'm going to make it through the season because it's so slow and it doesn't feel like it just needs to happen. But there are things that I did like in it. I just think that because you're trying to make a season here, which is trying to be just as engaging as that first one, that you have to try your best to do a little bit more than what is required. Like, something aside from the norms. But because you're doing such a huge course correction for the most part of the season, so much effort went into that trying to make structured plot or, you know, good pacing or tone, which is also really off sometimes. Sometimes the show will take this very high school teenage drama tone, and sometimes it will bring in this really dark, sinister stuff that should not be on cable TV at points, especially one part which, if you thought that the suicide scene at the end of season 1 was extreme, you're in for a treat. That's all I'm going to say about that, because there's something much worse in here. Much, much worse. Guys, in the end, this is a mixed bag. And that's kind of disappointing, because I did really like that first season, but unfortunately, this one takes too long. This one is very tedious. It just feels like it doesn't need to happen. I'm gonna give 13 Reasons Why Season 2 a C+. It needs better direction. It needs a more coherent, cohesive, plot adhesive, and it needs to understand what it needs to do, because season 2 ends on a very weird note that it has to have a season 3 now, but I'm curious as to what they're going to do in season 3. I'll give it that. It does end in a very interesting way, but we've gone beyond Hannah now. Hannah's story is done for good by the end of the season, so really, I don't know what they're going to do with season 3. Because there's no more reasons. I'm confused about this one. Guys, if you've seen 13 Reasons Why at all, let me know what your thoughts are about it in the comments below. I was a little reluctant to do this review because the first one was out of popular demand. To preserve continuity, I figured I'd do the second review as well. And here we are. Guys, if you like this, thank you so much as always for watching. Please do subscribe if you haven't yet. And I will see you guys at the TV shows.